Hi, everyone. So we're here to talk about adulthood. So this is ages 25 to 65, and I am not going to talk about every part of this unit that you are required to read about. I'm picking and choosing the ones I want to talk about, especially those areas where I have expanded the information from what's available to you through reading, and I have added articles and so forth, downloaded those into the unit for you to look at. So I am going to start this with intelligence, and I'm going to talk about personality and a couple of other little things in there for adulthood. So we are looking at the age range of 25 to 65, which is a huge time period. That's 4 decades. And if you think about a 25-year-old and a 65-year-old, they probably don't seem like they share a whole lot in common in terms of their lives. But that's adulthood. And there's a lot of growth and a lot of experience and a lot of things that happen during that time period. A lot of aging that takes place during that time period. So I am going to start my discussion around intelligence. Now you can read about the Seattle longitudinal study. That's fine. That's very available to you. I'm going to start with this quote. New research suggests that we are getting slower and wiser at the same time. So the question can be, are we getting smarter or dumber as we age and we go through these 4 decades, or we go through the 5 decades, including adolescence and so forth? Because it used to be believed that intelligence peaked at about 18. So, what's happening to us intellectually during this time period? And the Seattle longitudinal study is going to have some information for you. I want to start with talking about 2 different types of intelligence first, before I show you some updated research on this. So there's 2 clusters of intelligence here. There's lots of different kinds of intelligence we can look at, but there's 2 here we're going to talk about. Fluid and crystallized. This came about started with Raymond Cattell, the Cattell-Horn theory. Talked about these 2 things, and there's I think more information uploaded in D2L. So general intelligence is made up of approximately 100 abilities working together in various ways in different people to bring out different intelligences. So we look at just general intelligence, which is looked at primarily through IQ tests and so forth, but we can look at the different abilities that are studied inside of that and hone that down a little bit. So GF and GC, which is general fluid and general crystallized, separates these abilities broadly into these 2 separate kinds. And inside of each one of those is particular types of skills. So let's look first at fluid intelligence, which is sometimes the hardest to really kind of get, I would say, to understand what this is, but I've tried to break it down here. The ability to solve problems rapidly and flexibly. The ability to solve problems rapidly and flexibly adjust behavior according to ever-changing environments and situations. So to be able to go in and out of and navigate different places that we are in context, kind of quickly adjusting our thoughts and our abilities based on what's expected and needed of us in the moment. Ability to think abstractly, to reason, identify patterns, solve problems, and perceive relationships between items. So the WISC-4, which is one of our primary IQ tests that is given, does look at some of these abilities, especially this identify patterns and processing speed. So fluid intelligence uses processing speed. The quicker our processing speed, the more fluid intelligence we can have. So it includes things like problem solving, puzzles, thinking on your feet, street smarts, figuring out how things connect and what to do in a difficult situation in the moment. So that can be kind of street smarts, just kind of reading the scene and being able to problem solve at the moment. It takes a lot of quick thinking. And this is a younger person's type of intelligence. It does peak earlier in our 20s, this ability. A doctor might use in seeing a pattern in symptoms to make a diagnosis. Now, it's not the knowledge of what different diagnoses are or how to define different diagnoses and things. That's not fluid intelligence, but to be able to read a pattern inside of all of these different things that might be happening and bring that together, or a surgeon in the moment seeing some type of complex problem and being able to read what do they need to do right then to figure that out. A restaurant server might use to deal with an irate customer, seeing in the moment quickly how to appease the situation, how to handle it, what to do, thinking on our feet. Intelligence that an individual uses when he or she doesn't already know what to do. Figuring out how to get around a new city. If we're totally dropped into a new place and we've got to figure out how to make our way and deal with certain situations that might come up. So this is quick thinking. It's on the feet thinking that brings together problem solving, critical thinking, all of these things in the moment. It includes attributes such as attention, cognitive speed, working memory. So you have to have a larger, like a good working memory and processing speed, which are both tested via the WISC-4. Reasoning and episodic memory, to draw on your memory quickly to be able to see a pattern and make decisions. More of a native ability and not reliant on learning, education, or now it says or experience. Now experience can kind of grow a quickening in terms of certain situations. But it's kind of a native ability to read things and manage them. So one thing that's sometimes talked about is that actually stressful situations, people have to learn to use fluid intelligence in stressful situations if they grow up with a lot of stress, and how to navigate, read those scenes, read those scenarios, read faces in people quickly and figure out how to navigate that. And a lot of that is the fluid intelligence. So stress can actually over time, build this quality a little bit to be able to do that. Now, the other form, crystallized intelligence, so fluid, meaning it's organic in the moment, that it has to be flexible and fluid. So crystallized is a little more hardened knowledge, right? It depends on specific acquired knowledge or expertise, the result of learning, accumulated information. So our vocabulary, our factual information, if I was going to test you on, the definitions on Erickson's stages and Piaget's stages, can you remember, have you memorized those facts? Do you know what they, are? Can you give me the vocabulary? What is working memory? What is crystallized intelligence? That's that knowledge. Personality factors, motivation, education, cultural opportunity are central to its development, because what we're interested in and what we're going to pay attention to does sort of lead us to what types of crystallized intelligence we will learn better. So this is a lot of academic knowledge that can come into play. So now, because we've identified those, we have fluid, on your feet, quick in the moment, flexible knowledge, crystallized, hardened, informational intelligence. I'm going to just look at some of this newer research than this Seattle study. It was a study called "When Does Cognitive Functioning Peak? The Asynchronous Rise and Fall of Different Cognitive Abilities Across the Lifespan." This was actually a study published in March of 2015. So very recent. The study authors, Laura Germain, who's at the time when they started the study, I think they were both at Harvard, but now is a postdoc in psychiatric and neurodevelopmental genetics at MGH, and Joshua Hartshorn, postdoc fellow at MIT. So what there's two kind of things they did here. First, they reanalyzed. They took information from people who had taken the WISC, back in the early 90s when the test was created, and they went back and they reanalyzed that data, really trying to pick it apart with new information, reanalyzed those scores, charted the path of skills of these people. But then they didn't feel like this was a big enough pond. This wasn't a large enough number of people to really get a feel for this. And so they used what we have now, which is fabulous, and that's the internet. And they did survey and internet-based tests of reasoning, memory, and social intelligence. So they gathered data from 48,537 online participants, much bigger pool than they could get from that WISC, that Wechsler test. And they tested 4 tasks that they found that peaked at different ages based on the Wechsler text data. And they included a test of the ability to perceive others' emotional state, which is not measured. So remember that that is a whole different kind of intelligence, more of a emotional intelligence that we've talked about, that really didn't come into fashion until the 1990s and has grown in fashion over time in the last couple of decades. So what did they find when they did this? They took old information from the Wechsler tests and people that have been tested. They brought in new information from people using our newer technologies. And what did they find? Well, this is sort of short, but that processing speed peaks at 18 or 19, then starts to decline. So that's going to be our fluid, that's going to belong to our fluid intelligence, okay, that processing speed. Short-term memory continues to improve until about 25. So we hit that adulthood mark. It's all downhill from there. Then levels off and starts to drop around 35. So I'm just, I got nothing. But so both of those, that short-term or working memory and processing speed, are both part of our fluid intelligence. So what we do see is that there's going to be a decline as we age in our fluid intelligence. The ability to evaluate others people's emotions, though, peaks in the 40s or 50s. So this is where some wisdom comes in. This more ability to read others' emotions, to have social cognition. And those skills, some of that fluid intelligence, those skills, our emotional intelligence, can begin to rise. There was a vocabulary test, and vocabulary, again, is going to be part of crystallized intelligence. Showed that crystallized intelligence peaks later than indicated by the WISC. The WISC found that there was a peak in the 40s, somewhere in our 40s. This research showed a peaking in the late 60s or early 70s. So that's kind of astounding that some of our crystallized, our factual information, and the researchers decided this is all still up for research, but it's always growing, That's why we have to continue to look at newer information. They believe that might be a result of education, better education across time, that advanced work tasks that require a lot more reading and vocabulary knowledge, and more intellectual opportunities for older adults. So we continue to really use our minds more than maybe we did in past generations. And that ability is growing, and is growing our intelligence in some ways. So it's not all lost to us, to those of us who are past 35. There are things, we are getting wiser. If you think of wisdom as the kind of combination of heart and head intelligence, some of it, we're getting wiser. We have the capacity. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. All right. So I want to look at other types of intelligence, though, beyond this crystallized and fluid. Sternberg, we talked about him actually earlier. I drew him in earlier, but the text, this particular, at this point in time, text does it at this stage, and you can read a little more about him. Analytic, creative, practical. He has 3 types of intelligence that he works with. The analytic being very valuable in high school and college. Remember and analyze various ideas. That's going to be a lot of crystallized knowledge too. Some of it that we're expected to remember, use our memories. And the working memory though, and the abstract thinking to analyze will be some of the fluid stuff. Creative allows people to find a better match to their skills, values, or desires. And as we age, looking at what do we really love, what is meaningful to us, and how do we want to express it, how do we want to express who we are. That grows in adulthood, I think. That capacity to search ourselves in different ways than we do in adolescence and in emerging adulthood. At that time, we're kind of looking at, where do we fit in the world? What do we want to do with our lives? In terms of relationships and work and career. And as we age, we look a little more for, what's truly deeply purposeful to me. I think that grows over time. Practical intelligence, useful as people age and need to manage their daily lives. It's that street smarts, which does go with some fluid intelligence. but can come from greater knowledge of experience and sort of that ability to, that can be emotional intelligence, can kind of come in there too. How do we read people? How do we navigate situations? So a whole different one, creativity. Now, Daniel Goldman said that creativity probably has more to do with personality than with sheer intellectual power. People who enjoy taking risks, who are not afraid of failure, who are attracted by the unknown, or who are uncomfortable with status quo, are those likely to make creative discoveries. So this is part of that creative, Sternberg talked about creative intelligence and how does that grow in us as we age. So what I have for creative intelligence, this remote associates test, and there's a link in order to take it, if you like, a test of creative potential developed by Martha Mednick in 1962, a valid measure of creativity, the ability to see relationships between things that are very remotely associated. So I'm going to leave you to kind of follow that link, and if you're interested, it's tough. It's a tough test. But our creative intelligence, creative intelligence, though, is not just about our skills in art or dance or what we typically think of as creative. It's about being able to think outside the box, to look for ways to problem solve, to be creative in the world and with our skills and our talents. What can we do with them in new ways? And I think it's a huge one for, this generation and ongoing, because innovation is so part of what's going to be needed in the new world, as we move forward. And how to see things in new ways and create whole new ways of viewing the world and being in the world, using energies and designing things, as we have to use our minds to create new technologies as we grow. That's such a big part of who we are as humans now. And so I think this is going to be a really important part of our intelligence. So one more that is talked about a little bit in a very particular place, but I wanted to sort of grow this. I don't know what that 24 is. Daniel Capon, I'm not really sure how to say his name. He's a psychologist, researcher, and author. He did work at York University in the 1960s even, a long time ago. But here are just some of the things he has said are from him about intuition quotient. He's created a test, actually, to test for intuition, rather than just, our general intelligence. There is no way that our human ancestors could have survived without intuition. There was no time for thinking or laborious logic when escaping from movement in the brush, when you heard that thing in the brush. So this is quotes from him. The original instincts, now distilled as intuition, were probably based on a rapid access or fast-track system, separate from conscious thought, unencumbered by hesitation and doubt. Once speech was developed, allowing the transfer of information, the brain began its rapid expansion and involved the 10 billion cell neocortex. Here, logical speech-promoted intelligence took over, at the expense of experiential-based instinct, and the mind developed barriers or sensors to protect the concentrated attention of clear, alert reasoning from invasion by all else stored in the brain. So he sees intuition as one of our earliest forms of intelligence that allowed us to survive. And it was a fast-track system that wasn't brain-based fast-track system. And what he does say is that it is processed unconsciously. So this is part of our unconscious, which we have talked about. That real right brain system that reads things quickly and determines how to respond. Intuition is, in my view, the product of all the processed ancestral instincts of the species, through which unconditioned reflexes become conditioned and organized into patterns of adaptive behavior called instinct. So our reflexes over time, through experience, become our instinct, all done processed unconsciously. So he sees that we have lost, from the time speech took over, we begin to lose the power of our instinct because our connection to it, which is very right-brained, and if we believe what some say, that we have become very logic-based, that our left brain has become deemed more powerful and important in the world, and we have lost the magic of the right brain, which was our direct link to our unconscious, our body-based, conditioned, reflexive, instinctual behaviors. And he wanted to bring this back to life in some way. I get a little excited about that, don't I? So, he also, he interviewed some I'm sorry, trying to get rid of that. Nobel scientists, and about the secret of their success. You know, scientists, people that are logical, right? And they're using science. And what he found with them was that they said, of course we have hunches, because intuition is that hunch, that gut-based thinking. We know the answer before we work it out. Science, at its best, is the working out of things later. First comes the right brain, intuition and instinct, and then comes the left brain. That's why there's the book, The Emissary, The Master and His Emissary, with the thought that, thinking about the right and left brain, that the right brain is the master and the left brain the emissary. Just thoughts. Think about. Everyone has capacity for intuition, he believes. Most of us fail to use it fully. Certain traits such as openness are correlated with intuitive ability. And he has this test, the IQ-2, and just taking it helps people improve their perceptual skills. So I'll let you come back to the PowerPoint and read these. These are things that he believed that if you are intuitive, if you know that know what something is despite little time, can identify something you haven't seen clearly. And there's an article by him in Psychology Today, written in 1993, where he talks more about his how he sees all of this happening. I just wanted, for this screencast, I'm going to do one more short screencast, but for this one, just intuition now, and these are just some thoughts to think about. This doesn't come from him, but from, other things that we're discovering. Now, we still can't know exactly what intuition is. We do know more about the enteric nervous system. And the nervous system is the nervous system of the gut. It's neurons in our gut running from the esophagus to the anus, and it consists of 100 million neurons, more than in the spinal cord or the peripheral nervous system. The vagus nerve, which is that largest nerve in the body, runs from the throat to the gut, carries more information from the gut to the brain than from the brain to the gut. Now, I think I've done this before, but I want you to think about this in terms of intuition and what we're talking about here. And there's more serotonin that is developed in the gut than in the brain. So there's a lot going on in the gut. We also have like 40,000 neurons, tens of thousands of neurons around our heart. So there is this new kind of idea that a big part of our emotions are probably influenced by the nerves in our gut. So is this enteric nervous system, is it the seat of our intuition potentially? Those gut-based, the gut doesn't think as we think of the brain thinking. It doesn't make decisions, but it gives a lot of information, as the heart does, to what's going on in the system. And it might be this system that is kind of the driver of our intuition to some extent. I just kind of like that idea. So I thought I would share that with you. I'm going to do another screencast going through adults and stress and also personality. There you go.